this was meant to be the intro, but it's meant to be more or less something that beyond technology and all the techniques and thoughts and experiences that you have will make you the absolutely best spine doctors and surgeons on the planet. It'll optimize your potential. It'll allow you to really execute perfectly every single time. And I love the NHS for once. They have something that I really like as a motto. It's getting it right the first time. So this is not something where you kind of explore around and try this and then try that. You get it right the first time. So this GIRFT is something that we'll see far more. The NHS has just issued their annual report, which is for the first time ever, an example of a really successful large-scale data gathering. And of all the spine technologies, and this is a tangent, this is the single biggest breakthrough. It's big data that will be applied to all of us and to everything that we do, and hopefully in a meaningful fashion. So the humbling insight about spine surgery is the following. It is truly kind of the clinical adaptation of Murphy's Law. Have you ever noticed that in your practices? I mean, every little thing that you do or that you forget to do will backfire on you. And if it's just even one little thing in the history that you missed, or that little abuse history phenomenon or something in the OR, you missed this, you've dropped that, it's going to be the next most important thing that'll make it contingent or not if you succeed with your surgery. So this is the spine part of this. And again, this is a $135 million, there's a medical legal angle award supposedly given in Michigan for, quote, 5 botched surgeries. And media, as I personally can attest to, has become vociferous and has keyed in on medical mistakes and are gladly out there to publicize whatever they think is right. So 10, why the number of 10? Obviously, there is a religious component to this, but the number 10 is just a great round number that's been really done around. And again, consider this a culmination of essential thoughts that have accumulated over 30 years in practice and after several residency years and fellowship years. So 10 is a great round number. And why have I accumulated this and what is this about? This is something totally basic. This is about what made people masters in their field. And I have been a junkie in the ORs of literally all of the people here. I've had the great privilege of working with so many, and I'm looking forward to working with all of you. And one thing that struck me was the atmosphere when I work with these or see these masters at work. The probably greatest living neurosurgeon on the planet is Professor Majid Sami, and he's right next to another hero. By the way, the grandson of Professor Sami is here at this course, so this is really cool. And there are many non-biologic children of Professor John Jane, the late, great Professor Jane, here in this room, and you see them in action. So what was really the one quintessential thing when I saw this 80-year-old surgeon, Professor Sami, operate on an aneurysm? Absolutely calm, collected, nice. Everything was organized, and he clearly loved what he was doing. He could be well retired by now. He has a massive, beautiful, brain-shaped hospital. Actually, he has 3 of them now, one in Tehran and one in Beijing. But what is his atmosphere and demeanor in the OR? Super nice to everybody, clear, calm communications, totally focused, totally organized. And right afterwards, he pours everybody tea as the nicest gentleman in the world. Just the opposite, Doctor. No, never mind, Jim. I was going to say, Jim, but no. So these are some, in some logical sequence, 10 commandments that we've come up, and Rod has kind of changed it a little bit in self-serving fashion for SRS. But rule number 1 is so clear. Don't ever do Columbus surgery, okay? Everybody know what Columbus surgery is? Explore around, you're setting out in the ocean somewhere, you're going to the West Passage of India, and you're ending somewhere else. Happens to be America, also known as the West Indies, but let's not do that in spine surgery. We can really assume that nowadays we have the technology, we have the insights, we have the teaching, we have the collective wisdom to really know what we're doing, where we're going, what we're going to do. And if you're really needing a little buffer zone, you can make your consent, you can make your surgical plan, take that into account. We may add one level to it or something like that, but you don't go exploring around. You have a clear plan, right patient, right side, right level, without a question. You verify it afterwards. And the timing, just like a comedian, timing is so important. The timing has to be right. There are times to do it, and there are times to not do it. So right patient, right time, right time. And always, as you're still trainees, start every case with the attending. Why are we doing this? What level are we going? Why are we not doing this level? Ask questions. That's what I want our fellows to do. So that reflects preparation. between every one of those commandments, they may sound so trivial to you. There are several layers of thoughts behind that. This sounds so trivial. Positioning, no compromises. But guess what? The littlest difference can make a real disaster. And if you have this head too low for too long, guess what's going to happen? This patient's going to wake up and be blind. Perioperative vision loss. Venous congestion, purple earlobes, big orbital edemas. Jim, have you ever had a perioperative vision loss? I've had 3, but I hope I'll never have another one. And it's a disaster when it happens. Huh? One wasn't that long, but again, there are a number of factors, and I don't want to get into postoperative vision loss discussion right now. That's a whole lecture by itself, but the point is, it's a disaster.
I think total credit to the NCU guys that are in place do an unbelievable job. They're really dedicated with that. They bless fluid management. We have not had one in 20 years.
This is exactly what I have seen also, and I actually agree with you for once, second time in a day. That's an absolute unprecedented thing. Anesthesia is a big deal because if you have basically the old Harborview burn formula as your 10 liters crystalloids for the start of a case to combat hypotension, you'll have a problem. Whereas if you do volume replacement in terms of actual blood replacement 1-to-1, that's not going to happen. So no compromises. And again, it goes to every little detail. It's your responsibility. Don't let a nurse be tasked with that. It is your job to make sure everything is perfect. So all you know these things, but for instance, EKG leads, they should not, as you do MIS, override your skeleton, because guess what? Right, David? That's going to be exactly where something doesn't go quite right. That's where that cage, you're not quite sure where the cage is. And there's an EKG lead or whatever, a monitoring lead over it. Happens, Murphy's Law, right? Third, and this drives me nuts, right, Mark? Don't ever drape yourself out. So if you happen to go to the upper thoracic spine, where do you drape to? Occiput. You drape like for a lower cervical spine, no question. And same thing for the lower end. Again, this should be all cleanly prepped and draped. You should have a clear biomapping at the beginning of your case, so it's not a surprise. Words I never want to hear are, oh, don't worry about it, it's prepped underneath, right? We don't want that. That's not us. Mark never did that, by the way. So then, number 4, clear. It sounds so obvious, clear, dry, precise exposure. This is, again, just one of those things. I'm going to challenge all of you to something. This is metrics. Learn how to time yourself. Obviously, we all want to have a clear, dry, clean exposure. We have to know how to pace ourselves, but learn how long it should take you to do a whatever, L4 to S1 exposure. How long do you take for a scoliosis exposure? Learn those metrics, kind of keep track of them, keep a little book on them, reflect on your blood loss during that time, and see how much time it should take you to do something. Obviously, if you have a patient who bleeds a lot as you're starting, what are you going to do? Are you going to rush? The young man in the front. What are you going to do?
Just wait.
Here's a microphone.
Oh.
Green button, but you have to keep it depressed. Tell us your name and where you're from.
Oh. Name Francesco, I'm from Italy.
Excellent. Welcome. So what do you do? The patient, you open the patient up, you've done all your homework, the patient bleeds a lot. Are you going to rush, or what's your strategy? What are you going to do?
No, I probably try to release the retraction and take care of the bleeding, and then gently, and then re-retract later and see if that holds up.
Yeah. I mean, there are many things to do, and again, this is not the talk to do this, but again, once you have bleeding and it's not quite right, you slow down, you go through all the basics again, you don't just rush, you don't just plow ahead and ask for more sponges, right? Nobody does that. You basically revisit every single thing from TXA to Cell Saver, and you want to, again, learn how much time you spend on something. You don't want to get lost in a, whatever, mid-lumbar exposure. That's not the time. For our trauma world, I can tell you one thing. Having a very clear exposure and surgery time for acute trauma, because in your generation, the expectation will be we fix most trauma acutely, especially cord injuries, very rapidly. I totally agree with David. We're not going to mess around with those. The burden will no longer be 48 hours. It'll be 8 hours. Right, David? I mean, this is what all of us will be living with. So to do this, you can't have secondary hypotension. You can't have a bloodbath. You got to be able to do a surgery relatively dry, whatever technique you'll use. with 500 cc's, but certainly less than 1,000 cc's blood loss. Wouldn't you agree?
Without a question.
Jim, you agree? Oh, we have reciprocity. Fantastic. See, I'm a peacemaker between the Pennsylvania warring factions there. So I'm available for the United Nations. So clear, precise.
Our Pennsylvania wars are for entertainment purposes only.
I'm sure, yeah. So clear, precise exposure, and learn how much masters and how long an exposure should take. Obviously, you want to preserve your ligaments. Something that I hate is, let's say we're doing an L4 to S1 decompression fusion. And guess what? I walk in, and what happened to the L4 spinous process or the L3-4? It's gone. Ooh, don't like that, okay? We want to preserve what we do. Number 5, and this is the orthopotomy. I pride myself in being very good about dural repairs and everything like that. I don't wonder why. But again, don't do unplanned dural invasions. Plan your surgeries, know your posterior elements, know your scars, know the laminotomies, biologic dysplasias, etc. Anticipate and execute. Have a plan, how am I going to get in there? And by the way, one of those things, if you have obese patients, preserve the lumbosacral fascia, dissect it out so that you have a very clean, nice, repairable fascial plane afterwards. So absolutely clear. Now, Rule 6 is one of those things, the more technology we have, the more we have a cable mess. And again, the IT world hasn't figured that out, but we have to figure that out. Who has ever had a dropped instrument in their room, right? Have you had a young man there, a dropped Midas, a dropped whatever? It happens all the time. Guess what? It shouldn't. It's totally avoidable. How? We don't have a cable mess. The more stuff you have, the more you, on your side, will be the calm, controlling surgeon who has mastery over the field, who's in a very, very organized fashion able to keep the cables disentangled. And again, the more stuff we'll have, light cables here and everything like that, harmonic scalpel, everything, the more you want to have your cables disentangled. And guess what? You have a surgical tech, and they can always help you. Hey, I'm starting to see a mess here. Can you keep those disentangled? It'll be way better. No messes, no drops. We have usually about a 15-yard penalty for dropped tools, right? I don't know what you guys do. Tyler, what do you do when you have dropped instruments? You hate that also, right?
Absolutely.
How many yards penalty do you give when a fellow drops a Midas?
The thing is, you don't get them back always. That's the key, right? If you lose one, you got to go without sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, in my Harborview days, when we dropped a Midas, and this is where I came up with this, it was game over. You had to basically go to the osteotomes or something else. There was no other Midas. Here we're in heaven. We get another Midas and another Midas.
Well, I have two. I have a double setup for everything, which I get one and they get one. But if theirs goes down, then it's just me. They're out of the game.
But I can assure you, if you drop, for instance, your bipolar, the tool that whatever you drop, you'll need most next. That's again, the Murphy's application of fate. So no drops. And again, it creates a flow situation. It creates a teamwork atmosphere. And this is what you want to aspire to. You want to be like Professor Majid or like Dr. Jane. You want to be one of those people who has complete control over everything in an effortless fashion. So no cable mess, no drops, nothing. Number 7, again, this is one of those things. You've worked for 8 to 10 hours, right, Hudi, on a horrible tumor. What is the worst thing that you can hear a nurse tell you? What is the worst thing you can hear from a nurse after you've scrubbed out, you're tired, you've done a great job, and you've started to close, cotton counts are off. We're missing a 1 by 1 or whatever, a half by half, even better, right? It's just like, oh no. And the next thing you see is all the trash bins are opened up on the ground. There's 5, 6 nurses on the ground trying to find that half by half that somehow got lost. This is 100% almost avoidable, outside of very few cases. If you have a simple rule, and that goes for all the tools also, there are only 2 places for those things. One is in the patient, and one is on the back table. No cottonless, you can be whatever immersed. Don't drop your tools, don't drop anything, sponges, etc., anywhere else but in their target area or in their ready position. Nowhere else is permissible. And just yesterday, I violated my rule and I dropped a small rod holder because I put it on the patient whilst I was grabbing something. Just yesterday, in front of my dear fellows who are sitting in the room, I dropped a tool because I violated my own rule. So, Rule 8 here, but we are a little bit out of sync. This is where I usually play Paul Simon, but you guys don't know who Paul Simon was. Anybody remember Paul Simon outside of, Jim Harrop, thank you. Tyler, thank you, another friend. Rod doesn't even know who do you know who Paul Simon was? Some artist, yeah, way back, yeah. But he had a great song, Slip Sliding Away. Always be in control of your tools. Know when you're doing a power move, put 2 hands on the tool. As long as you're a fellow or a resident, use 2 hands. You never, ever, you want to develop the Zen-like control of yourself. I'm not slipping, I'm not sliding, I'm not plunging, because that could be death. That can be the difference of a happy patient who's walking out of here a day later versus somebody who's on rehab for the next 3 months and it's going to scourge you for the rest of your working days. And these are these great words of that song, slip sliding away. You know, the nearer your destination, the more you slip sliding away. The closer you get to the end of a case, that is your danger time, right? Because you're starting to think about, oh, I'm going to go motorboating with Rod now. And you're going to stop having this concentration. Know what I'm saying? Right, Hootie? The worst time is at the very end. You've worked beautifully. You've had this whole dissection. You're so close, and then somebody slips with a tool just at the very end, putting a damn crosslink in or something. Yep, it's at the end. Asymptotically towards the end is not at the end. You want to be at that finish line. And so 2 hands for power tools and everything like that, I think until you're really out there and have done this for a while, I can't tell you how much that means. Number 9, guess what your best business card is? It's not your business card. This is what I do with my patients. And my fellows and residents know that I like my x-rays to look really, really nice unless I just can't help it. Why is that? That's the best business card. I have a printout, a simple paper printout with my name on the floor or whatever, and my nurses print that out and give it to the patients. I can't tell you how many patients have come to me saying, I've seen your x-rays on the refrigerator of whatever, Mrs. Smith, okay? And it looks just beautiful. I like that. I like my screws to be nice and clean. I don't like to have a mess. I like to have everything as nice and clean. And even my microdiscs, where I put a little ball probe into the disc space, I give that to the patients. This is their memento. This is my business card for them. So take pride in what you do. And don't have something, because somebody will get a CT scan. If a patient isn't quite right, assume they'll get a CT scan. So whatever you try to fudge away in this day and era of accountability and transparency is not going to be hideable. It's going to be out there. Somebody's going to get a CT and go like, ooh, Chapman did this one. And ooh, look, that decompression wasn't quite done. Ooh, right, Isaac? I mean, you've seen my cases, right? You've laughed about my cases, right? No, it's take pride in what you do. This is your penmanship. This is your artistry. This is where truly you're not a technician. You're the artist. Best business card in the world. And number 10, and this is again, and by the way, that goes to closure also. The 2 things outside of just having normal function that patients look at is their incision and the x-rays, right? You have a nice looking incision. This is what patients go, bye, doc, you did a great job. I still have all this pain, but that incision looks beautiful, and those x-rays look great. And the final thing is nobody gets hurt. Obviously, not our patients, but think about ourselves also. When you pass that next number 15 long handle back to the scrub tech behind you, or that large Galpy or whatever sharp fang tool you have, pass it blunt side first and announce it. Think that nobody gets hurt. This is you, and you're in charge of this. So this is my final thing. Nobody gets hurt. This is a big charge. We have vulnerable patients. We're in a vulnerable system with many different things that are difficult to do. So do it right. The final parting words that I like is, and when I see young fellows working with me, for whatever reasons, I see them kind of futzing around with their suckers a lot and with their Midas. You know what? I love efficiency. I love precision. Do it right the first time, GERFed the first time. Speed and futzing around fast, trying to be a half-hour microdiscectomizer, take an hour, but do it absolutely perfectly, and the patient will be happy, everybody will be happy. I'm not asking you to be slow, but always think about, like the great Professor Jürgen Harms, efficient and precision. And then you can have good indications also. Thank you.